We shouldn't be in a place of feeling like we're having to survive our practice, especially when we are in a position of autonomy where we can actually decide what it's like. A lot of people, work for them is helpless. They are a cog in the wheel. That's not true of most orthodontists. Maybe of associates or maybe of employees, but of actual like orthodontic practice owners, you're in control. And I think knowing that is a very powerful thing. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Digital Orthodontist Live. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Fagala, and today I am joined by my good friend and business partner, Luke Infinger. Luke is a CEO at like HIP, Neon, Ion, whatever you want to call all that, orthodontic marketing mogul and farmer, right? And father and friend and all that gets wrapped up in all that. He's here in Memphis with us today, so we're going to talk about chapter 1 of our book that we wrote together.
Yes.
The Practice Paradox.
It's a good one.
It's a good book. Look how thick that book is. Look at that. It's amazing. So we're going to get into that today, and we're going to sip some water out of black mugs.
Cheers.
Why not? It looks professional when we do that. So I guess the first question I want to start with, Luke, is why did we write this book? And what is the Practice Paradox?
Well, I think that when we first came together and started talking, it was clear that we wanted to write a book. Both of us had a lot of new ideas and concepts. And I mean, it's funny because I was reading this today on the flight here and making some posts on Instagram, and a random person wrote in about the book who's not an orthodontist. And I think that's what's cool about the book is there's so many practical things that could be put into practice by anybody, not just an orthodontist, but really on the climb to success, chasing success. Are you chasing the right things? And I think that's one of the paradoxes. What got you here isn't going to get you there.
Yeah. I mean, I have written down that the paradox is that successful doctors are often overwhelmed by life, and they find themselves to be unhappy, and that there's this tension that many doctors feel, myself included, between outward success and internal heaviness. Or you could say there's this tension between having a growing practice, a successful practice, but having a shrinking emotional reserve. So it's, people tell me all the time, like, you're so successful, how do you do it all? And at the same time, I feel a lot of days like kind of empty and burdened, and I feel like that I almost live a life that's incongruent with the life that I wish that I had. And that overstates it. I'm very grateful for the life that I have.
Sure.
But there's just some days where it's like, man, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah, I think it's that plus always chasing more. It's not enough.
Yeah.
So it's this paradox of I don't know if I can do this anymore, but I want more. I want more quote unquote success. And then what is success?
Yeah, I don't know that I can tell you what success is. I guess it depends. When I lecture on this topic, mental health and some things, I always use the example of City Slickers and Curly. Billy Crystal's character asks Curly, he's having his midlife crisis and he's going on this cattle drive, and what's the meaning of life? And Curly sticks up a finger, and Billy Crystal says, "What, your finger?" And he says, "No, it's just one thing. And once you realize what that one thing is, everything else doesn't mean anything." He says it in a cowboy language that I won't use on the podcast. But I think what success is determined by the person themselves. It's unique to that person. But it certainly isn't practice success necessarily. It's usually something a little more central, a little more core, family, relationships, legacy, meaning. From a religious standpoint, it's, probably oneness with God or something along those lines. It's not how much I produced last year as an orthodontist.
Yeah. It's probably more based around giving than getting.
Yeah. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
One word that we use that is probably a goal, you could say, is joy. And joy would be like a peace or contentment, and not the same thing as happiness, which we'll talk about maybe in this next segment. And it's trying to avoid this place of burnout or this place of feeling overwhelmed and stressed, which again, and that's the practice paradox, is how do you create a practice that serves this greater purpose of life or this greater goal of life, as opposed to just achieving more and doing more and growing more, because that doesn't seem to lead to a happy life or a joyful life.
Yeah, and there's that famous saying, more money, more problems.
Yeah,
right?
I've heard that. For sure, I've heard that.
It's definitely not just a monetary thing in terms of success. And, I think it's great to have. I think money can do more than poverty, for sure. It's a resource. It's a good tool, or can be. But I don't think it's the definition of success. I don't think more is the definition of success.
I will make this disclaimer. I've seen a Facebook admin who shall remain nameless, I have written down, who's been criticizing the idea that there's been too many conversations around the topics of burnout and mental health and some things like that. And it's funny, once I read that, I sort of took it personally because, oh man, I've been talking about this for a while. And in fairness, I've been lecturing on this topic for 8 or 9 years now. And obviously the book delves into this a lot. And I don't think this guy's talking about, he's a general dental group admin. But I have then noticed there's a lot of people talking about this. And what the point of them talking about it is to try to sell people on coaching and things. And I just want to be clear, we're talking about this. We wrote this book, I think, because there are issues that we've dealt with. And there are issues that I really do sincerely want other doctors to be able to figure out. And I would like, in a sense, to be able to tell myself from 12 years ago, hey, Kyle, here's some things you need to look out for. Here's some things you need to be aware of as you structure your practice, as you decide how you want to grow your practice. Might be helpful for you to know about this and to know where you're headed. And so it's easy to be cynical and to say, oh, there's too much of this and it's just opportunistic. But I can say for myself, and I'm going to speak for you too, that's not why we're doing this.
No. So. Yeah. And I mean, we could play kind of devil's advocate. Yeah. Sure, maybe some things that happen, aren't necessarily depression or burnout. Maybe not. I do think that being overstimulated constantly, I can develop things on AI. I'm getting texts. I can get on Instagram, TikTok, and all this messaging and all this information. Our brain is not meant to handle the information and the inputs that we have. And so how does that amplify things that we deal with? That's number one. Number two, what is promoted throughout culture? And sometimes people may latch onto things because they're not sure what is happening. And so certain things, certain labels could be applied. So I'll play devil's advocate with whoever this was. Sure, maybe it is talked about too much, or maybe it is misdiagnosed. But I also think there's a lot of things at play that if you can understand, like we talk about even in the chapter about like health, if you put your phone away for a day and just go out on the beach, you will feel less stress and less anxiety. And so I think there's strategies that can help you. But ultimately, I do think that, we are kind of wired for this chase of success and high performance. And that does create burnout and, mental health type of issues that may not be long-term. But again, we're trying to help people kind of get ahead of that.
And in fairness, I think white-collar professionals have been, the target of burnout, of suicidal ideation, like mental health issues for decades.
And I think that's a stat that proves it within dentistry is suicide is very high.
Yeah.
And so it is a real issue.
Yeah. And I do agree. I don't think we're meant to sort of shoulder all that burden, that awareness burden, as it were. But you know what? We're going to have to. So let's talk specifically burnout, like what that looks like. What is burnout? That's where you live in a state of stress or overwhelm for too long and you get to a point where you can't handle it. There's some element of pressure that is helpful. From pressure comes diamonds or whatever you want to say. Like,
Right.
pressure is what makes an athlete perform at a higher level and so on. Like, we know that. And as a student in dental school, there's the pressure of the tests and the things you got to do, and it actually makes you perform a little bit better. Okay, we get that. But that state of being for too long, it leads to burnout. It leads to stress that's of a chronic nature, which is kind of marked by fatigue, dread, guilt, loss of enthusiasm, things like that. Some other things that burnout looks like: you mentally multitask during family moments. You check email at night and first thing in the morning. Oh, definitely. You're irritable. You have an emotional flatness. You have insomnia, and maybe you even have years without real rest. So those are like some kind of like maybe ways of
just apathetic too.
And I got there for me personally probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right after COVID ended, and just everything was kind of converging upon this, And I remember coming home from work and just not having enough energy to even want to be around the people in my life that mean the most. And it's sad and it's pathetic in a way. It's not what I want to be about. And I've had to do a lot of work to get on the other side of that. And it still can be a struggle. And there's a lot, there'd be a whole episode on just, what did I do? What is it that I find that I need to do? And maybe we'll get into some of that today. Some other statistics. Sorry to read so much, but at this section, it seems necessary. U.S. depression rates have risen sharply over the last decade. 44% of dentists report burnout symptoms. There is, as you said, and as we all know from Seinfeld, there's elevated suicide rates within dental professions still today. And there's links between chronic stress and long-term physical illness. And so the way that we think becomes the way that we feel. And we know that. And these are things that are all like self-evident, but it's, helpful to kind of bring it all to the table at the same time. And so again, the paradox, what the practice paradox is how do we have the most successful doctors among us who have succeeded and achieved at a high level their entire lives now burn out and not thriving, not coming to the plate, as it were, to hit home runs with their families and with their relationships and with the things outside of the practice, and then in effect too end up in the practice being pretty miserable and not hitting home runs there either. Like, how does that happen? What can we do to fix it?
As the practice starts to become exhausting, this happened with me at HIP. It's like, well, I mean, you're not going to find that joy because fulfillment does bring joy. So how do you get to a place of fulfillment instead of exhaustion?
What have you done to get there?
The book talks a lot about this, which we'll hit in a next episode, is the right team. If you don't have the right team and you're constantly micromanaging and you ultimately can't live in the role within your business that you want to, that's just one of the reasons why that you could not have fulfillment in your business. Is I'm banging my head against the wall, micromanaging. Now I'm doing HR. I'm approving time off requests. I'm training people front of the house. I didn't go to school for this. Can somebody else train them? I want to be in the clinic, And again, that's just one path, but there's many. I'm sure a lot of these doctors and orthodontists. I'll bring up, one without mentioning his name. Massive practice. He's been doing this longer than most people, probably 40 years. Now he's kind of in the autumn of his career, so he's doing less. But I mean, when I went to see him, he was blowing and going, seeing, over 100 patients a day, and he was not burnout. And so what's his strategy? His wife worked next to him. She was a periodontist and, talked all about his family and grandkids. And he was just like so joyful. And so how do you have that where you could still be a high performer? You could still kind of chase success, but at the same time, he had a strategy to be happy and be content. And so what's that look like? Maybe, is it a generational thing? I don't think so. I think it's a mindset thing.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset thing. As you sort of said, there's some people that never get to a place of burnout. Good for them. They're either just innately wired or they figured it out along the way. And people like us, we didn't. this first chapter tries to get at some different ways to figure this out, because obviously it's not just one thing. One of those, I think, is the mental part. It's the mindset part. And I think it's helpful to look at the difference in joy and happiness. And, we even use the words interchangeably. Of course, you used happiness earlier in a way that I think is probably more like joy.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is happiness is situational. It's temporary.
It's a moment.
It's achievement based. It's very much like culturally like how we think of things. You want to be happy, well, go on a vacation. You want to be happy, go
It's the weekend.
Buy this thing. It's the weekend. It's go to Vegas, whatever. Like that's
a lawnmower made me happy.
Well, things can, and there's only so much wrong about a sweet lawnmower. You have a really awesome lawnmower. Joy is more durable. It's rooted in alignment. I like that word, alignment, between values, priorities, and lifestyle. Joy is sort of like happiness, but independent of circumstances. In a sense, I think of it as peace or contentment when I think of joy. It's more long-standing, again, more durable. I like the idea of alignment. We think of like orthodontics as being, ortho refers to straightness or alignment, just like orthopedics is that same thing. And I like that idea of everything being lined up in the way that it should be. And so that's everything in your life from, and really like emanating from your values, like at your core, what is it that you believe to be true? If you can line your life up around that, then what follows from that is going to be good. It's going to be productive.
Yeah.
Right? I don't
bring back the word congruence.
Congruent. That word, it really hits
such
the
a
nail
good
on the
word.
head. It is a good word. One thing that I think is true of doctors is that we've been trained into this sort of short-term performance-based thinking, which again is like more akin to like happiness. It's like, again, it's like short term, it's achievement based. As a dental student, there was a period there where we'd have 3 tests a week. You're always like being forced into this achievement based path where it's, you're like a rat in a cage in a sense. And then now you get out and it can become the same thing where if you're so focused on case starts and production goals and things like that, you are in effect like a rat in a laboratory test.
Well, you bring up performance.
Yeah.
There again, an old saying, you're only as good as your last film. Look at actors who were great and then they had a bad film and their career is destroyed or they're made fun of. It's the same with music or, a football player is great and then, has a bad game. And when we get into that performative type of mode, we might be setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah, sure. Well, you certainly set yourself up to be depressed or to feel down about the state of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe what it's about as much as anything. It's, again, joy being contentment. It's about being content with what it is that is the lot of your life. Right. And for so many of us as dentists or orthodontists, from any like objective standpoint, your life seems great. Mm-hmm. You're healthy, you're successful, you're financially stable, you have a family, like you have this business that's doing great. And why are you miserable? Why do you view this to be bad? Well, because my conversion rate was 47% last month. It's
or I got a bad review. Or
I got a 1-star review and it like ate me up for 3 days.
We didn't hit the production goal that I wanted to hit. What's interesting before we hop to the next topic is a part of the book mentions third world countries.
Sure.
And there was actual research and studies done, and they found that there was a lot higher long-term happiness, less depression, less suicide. And I think you've been to third world countries. Mm-hmm. I've been to Pakistan. And again, could talk a whole episode. Why'd you go to Pakistan? This was like 10 years ago. What I found was that people did seem much more joyful, much more friendly, even smiling. Like we could go walk around outside. Most people you walk past, they're not going to be stuck in a smile. In Pakistan, they were like everyone was smiling. And, that's a place where 2 weeks before I went there, a Catholic church was blown to bits and, 350 people got injured and people died. But, I'm not saying I want to go move to a third world country, but there's something to that where basic needs are met and also their back is against the wall to where they know that those basic needs could go away at any moment. So they're truly thankful. I don't know that we think about that. Like, I've had a coffee since I've been here. I got a, Arnold Palmer at the restaurant. It's like you can get whatever you want, whenever you want. And when I was in Pakistan, it's like I'm dumping water over myself to bathe, and you really start to think about the simple things in life that you have. And I think that really matters. I don't know that people talk about gratitude. And if you're into Tony Robbins, he talks about that being one of the most important things. But as cheesy as it is, there's something to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think gratitude is the most consistently linked characteristic to joy. Like it's the most predictive thing of joy. If you could start your day being, thankful for all the things in your life, if you could do, sort of like routines around gratitude, it's going to lead to more contentment in life.
And something the book mentions is the comparison trap. So constantly seeing what the other orthodontist has or the other multi-specialty practice. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not there yet. Why?
Yeah. Comparison, as we know, is the thief of joy. And truly, as we're talking about joy and how do we find more of it, comparison works against that as much as anything. Comparison becomes envy, or it becomes, you want to covet things. It becomes greed. It becomes then pride, because if you see that someone has something more than you, pride forces you to try to attack them. Well, they probably cheated, or they probably didn't do it the right way. I mean, people say that all the time when they see a successful practice. They'll say, oh, well, I could do that, but I'm better than that. I don't want to, or I don't want to, that's not the way that I want my practice to be. And so that sort of feeling, it's ugly. It's sort of like
they couldn't give quality care if they're like that.
Some things are unavoidable. Some level of stress, some level of, even chronic difficulty is going to be a part of running a practice or of life. I mean, some things in life are hard, but there are some things that we willingly take on that it makes no sense because we know it's not good for us. And to be fair, it's probably things like social media and our phones, a lot of these things that we do more now than ever before, screen time through the roof. We're saying yes to so many things that we're ended up saying no to things that really matter, or the things that would lead to joy. Yeah. And then, of course, we're not saying yes to some things that would lead to joy too, just because we're undisciplined. So
and everything's a choice, right? Because you can't have multiple thoughts at a time. You can't be in multiple places at a time. And I certainly didn't always look at it this way, but to do something or be somewhere or gain something, that means losing or giving up something somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this can be a really good strategy, because if you are thinking negatively, how can you flip that thought to a positive thought? Because you want to stop thinking negatively as quickly as possible. Even if it is a reality, what's the opportunity, or how am I going to turn this around for a useful outcome?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it actually leads into our next key issue. Again, things that are keeping us from joy or maybe leading us down the road towards burnout is what's called reaction mode. Or I've thought of it as, this is actually from Harv Ecker's book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, and it talks about reactive persons and proactive persons. And reactive people are those that say that life happens to me, whereas
that was one of my notes to bring up. Is life happening to me?
Yeah, or am I making life happen? Effectively. And so a proactive person would say that they create their life. And in fact, the joy that comes from that sort of a proactive mindset is palpable. And so what is reaction mode? This is where you allow the things that in effect you set up. I mean, you are in as a leader, as a business owner, you're the one responsible for setting these things up, but then you almost act as if they rule you. And so no, you have the ability to decide what your schedule is going to be, what your staff is like, what vendors you use, or what, how you interact with patients. But if you have a reactive mindset, those things are happening to you and you're almost, helpless against these forces, which obviously doesn't help. I like this phrase, is that reaction mode looks like leadership, but it feels like survival. And we shouldn't be in a place of feeling like we're having to survive our practice, especially when we are in a position of autonomy where we can actually decide what it's like. A lot of people, work for them is helpless. They are a cog in the wheel. That's not true of most orthodontists. Maybe of associates or maybe of employees, but of actual like orthodontic practice owners, you're in control. And I think knowing that is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I have a note from a training that I was in. Hero or victim are both bad. Composure and humility equal effectiveness. And so it's interesting because as you were talking about, is life happening to me? That's kind of a victim mindset. The opposite of that is, and I think something that is painted as positive, is we want to be the hero. I fixed it. I built the practice. I have the best culture. Everybody's coming to visit my practice. And that can be really dangerous or damaging long-term too, because again, it's that performance that we talked about versus can you have composure and humility?
Yeah, the leader that doesn't have to make everyone know that they're the leader, or doesn't have to have all the glory.
Yeah, one person who was teaching me about composure said the best person to study is Andy Griffith on the Andy Griffith Show because, he's composed. You've got Barney Fife who is posturing or collapsing. And then you've got Andy Griffith who's just a composed. He's humble. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He doesn't even carry a gun.
Let's shift into this. Let's talk about the values vision framework and talk a little bit more about alignment. We've already touched on some of this, but I do think that the way that you think and the way that you structure the priorities of your life ultimately is the way that your life is going to look. Okay? Especially if you're a really values-driven person, if you're a very disciplined person and you keep your priorities in check, that is what your life will ultimately become, is how you blueprint it out, how you vision things. And so values are what matter most at a core level. Your vision is what you want your life and practice to look like from years from now. And so if your values and your vision don't match your systems or your business, there's obviously going to be a lot of conflict and tension around that. I think this is where you'll start to succeed in a certain way, as maybe some people would see success, but you feel like you're falling behind or you feel like you're failing. And I think it's just because your values and your vision are not aligned, if that makes sense.
Do you think that you have to have like written down values, or do you just know what your values are because of how you live and some of the foundational beliefs that you have?
I think it helps to write them out.
Down.
I mean, every year I have a sheet that has 7 different categories of things in my life that I want to invest time in and I want to create legacy around. And I think it's important because it reminds you of all the different areas of your life that should be important. And it helps to align the focus of my days and months and year around these things that matter.
Did you ever study Stoicism or?
A little bit.
Well, it's interesting because like the founding fathers, you look at Benjamin Franklin and he has, the 13 virtues.
Yeah.
And they studied Stoicism as well. And it seems like they're very much into writing out, and his are just one word. It's like, humility or trustworthy. It's not like he was writing out sentences or paragraphs about his values.
I think there's a lot that could be said. I think that values, like you think about like American values or like what would be like the base average cultural values of the moment, I don't think those values are very good. To be fair. And so a vision that's built on those values, I don't think is going to lead to a place where you are going to be innately joyful and peaceful and content and so on and so forth. You might lead to a place where you're successful from some metrics, but it doesn't mean that your family life and your work life, your spiritual life, all those things are going to be positive. You may get lucky for a little bit, but I think long term it's probably not going to work out. And so I think unless you study like, well, what are good values, how should I structure my life, and that you actually keep yourself disciplined around those things, I don't know how you find success in those ways. Because it's a lot to keep balance. I mean, that's the one thing about being a business owner, an orthodontist, specifically, is life is busy. I mean, you're seeing hundreds of patients every day. It's a lot. It's a ton of interactions.
Yeah.
And it requires more discipline than if you were just seeing 5-10 patients a day. I mean,
I talk about this in Master Your Mindset, which is, a book that I wrote.
Yeah.
And the way that I did it, my strategy that I learned from somebody else was called a morning formula. And the person I learned it from had like a deck, and they would read through and look at the decks. So there was visualizations. They would literally read it to themselves every single morning, hence morning formula. I put a spin on it and recorded a voiceover of myself talking and edited a movie, video, different images and things. And I would religiously watch and listen to this every single morning, except the weekends. And I found myself editing this maybe every quarter, because I also put financial goals or business goals in. Even client count was in there. I want to have X amount of clients or X amount of customers, depending on the business. But it really worked. And in the book, I give a QR code to one of mine. It'd probably be embarrassing if we played it now, because it's like years ago. I constantly kept upgrading it, and I would find myself change it drastically. I remember one of my morning formulas had nothing in it about money or success. It was very value driven and family driven, and goals that I had for my wife and myself, or health. And so it's constantly changing based on what I felt I was lacking or missing. And I really think there's something to almost programming yourself, or repetition, or hearing it and seeing it over and over again. If I were to pull up those morning formulas, this is kind of a long way to say what I'm about to say, and look at what's in them, and all the way from the numbers to personal goals to health, I achieved a lot of those things. And I think it was because I was kind of fixated. This is what we're talking about conceptually, is that idea of have it written down, go over it. Maybe every morning when you write gratitude, you're also reading your values, and it will really help you speed up or be in alignment or have congruence around those things, because you quickly can fall out of alignment.
Yeah. This reminds me of just like a mantra, or, for someone
that's
like a monk or a spiritual leader, like a phrase that they say over and over. I'm in the middle of reading this book by Brother Lawrence that's Practice the Presence of God, I think it's called.
Interesting.
And his entire like mantra, in effect, was to be aware of the presence of God in his life. And so then everything would flow out from that. And that's a pretty like simple idea.
Very simple.
But I think oftentimes a mantra is very simple.
And maybe the word in what I was talking about, or what he's talking about, or what you're talking, is to meditate on it. Like, are you taking 5-10 minutes a day to actually meditate on values?
To slow down and just focus on the thing that matters the most.
Yeah.
Well, we've got more. I've got a few more things.
Do you have the J.O.Y framework?
That's the next one.
Perfect. Look
Amazing.
at that. Mind reader over here.
The J.O.Y decision framework. This is another thing where the J stands for journey, the O stands for outcomes, and the Y stands for you. And this is a 3-part filter that can lead to aligned decisions. Okay, so it's the J.O.Y decision framework. So let's get into this J.O.Y decision framework and what it means. And so as we're kind of saying, the J, the O, and the Y stand for different things. The J being the journey, the O being the outcomes, and the Y being you. Journey, let me just kind of read this. It's the process dimension. It focuses your daily practices and processes, how you approach each day, each patient interaction, and each decision with intentionality rather than with reactivity. So that journey and the processes you go through. The O, the outcomes, is the results dimension. This emphasizes what you're actually creating and prioritizing, the relationships, experiences, and contributions that provide lasting meaning beyond production metrics. And then lastly, the why, the you, it's the personal dimension. It establishes your personal capacity, understanding who you are, maintaining your health, and building the self-awareness necessary for authentic decision making. So there's a lot to sort of take into that, and it really acts as sort of a rubric where you can kind of run different possibilities through this. What's the journey going to be like? What are the outcomes from this going to be, and how is it going to impact yourself, I guess?
Yeah, and my takeaway is fall in love with the process. That's the journey. Take care of yourself and have clear outcomes.
So one of the examples, for what it's worth, is, and people will ask this question like, should I start a second location? Let's just say. Okay, well, evaluate it through the journey, the outcomes, and how it's going to affect yourself. And oftentimes, you need to slow down, force yourself to actually visualize and think through the impact that it's going to have in all those three separate parts of your life. Maybe the outcome is what you want. Like, yes, I want to produce more. I want to, have a more thriving practice. But when you actually look at the journey, okay, what is that 1 year process going to look like to start this practice? What is the impact going to be on myself, but also on my family and the relationships in my life? Is this a good time? Maybe you got 4 kids that are super active in athletics, and when you actually put it through that filter, you realize that it actually doesn't line up with what's most important.
And a lot of times we think linear. So more production means I have to open a new location.
Right.
I went to visit a practice a couple months ago, and they were thinking the same thing. Hey, we want to hit this goal. We're not there. We don't think we can do it with the locations we have. So we need to go open a new location. That's what everybody talks about, right? How many locations do you have? I go visit the practice and ask, well, how many phone calls are you guys missing? Well, we don't know. Okay, well, where do you track that? And the good news is they actually did have software that tracked it. They use Weave. This is not a commercial for Weave. But I'm like, oh, well, I know Weave has these stats, so let's look. What's the percentage of phone calls you think they were missing? Just guess.
They were missing 30%.
38%.
Wow. So
we did the math, and if we created incentives for the team to answer the phone 90 to 95% of the time, and we were averaging in of those phone calls X amount of new patients, they could probably achieve the growth they were wanting just by picking up the phone. And so this is 2D thinking versus 3D thinking. Are you thinking about things linear or interconnectedness? Because there's not one way to skin the cat. So as you're thinking about goals, it'd probably be a lot less stressful to figure out a way to pick up the phone versus open a new location. We're talking conceptual in most of this, right?
Yeah.
But we could go tactical of like, how many people do you have in recall?
Sure.
How many people have come in, been in a consult, they were a great candidate, they didn't start. What are you doing with that list? We, in another business I have, we had a list of 2,500 people. They said, hey, Luke, these are all bad leads. We're just going to stick them over in the bad lead column. We need new strategies to get new leads. So I wrote one text message. It was a short sentence and said, send this out as a blast to the 2,500 people. The next day we signed a contract from one of the 2,500, right? There was another phone call with another one who now is interested in moving forward and getting ready for 2026. So again, are you maximizing what you have, or are you just thinking it's somewhere else? You know, and the reality is we would have gone out and spent more money to get another 2,500 leads to in 6 months be having the same conversation versus let's change how we are looking at it. Let's look at it from a different perspective.
I think I would also add one of the ideas from the book is it doesn't have to be some massive like sea change to get to where you're after, to like eliminate burnout from one's life. We talk about the compound effect, and it's life is not transformed by one dramatic decision. It's usually transformed through small, repeated, aligned decisions. So some of these real examples of compounding would be just a general approach of protecting one's evenings, maybe from a hiring perspective, hiring early, not waiting for it to become painful, but maybe even over hiring to some extent to reduce stress in the long term, as you said, long-term focused, raising fees gradually as opposed to like waiting a few years and then having to do it, saying no to misaligned opportunities frees up a lot of bandwidth, and then it has on here taking real vacations, like being proactive about that. All these little small repeated aligned decisions will actually transform one's life. And so that is really where it comes down to, like, what are your values? What's your vision for that? Are you using the J.O.Y decision framework, or are you not?
Yeah.
Are you long-term focused, or are you just reacting to all the little things as a sort of hero in your mind, but you're actually just swinging a sword and not hitting anything? Or
Frantic.
you're sort of shadow boxing.
Yep.
And you're really shadow boxing an enemy that you've created, in effect. We've talked about some of the issues. We've talked about maybe some of the sort of high-level solutions, some of these like framework. Again, it's like very like esoteric in a lot of ways. I like this. These are, changes that you will actually see in doctors who start living this kind of a way. I want to read some internal changes: reduced anxiety, better sleep, more clarity and less rumination, a calmer nervous system, between home and family, true presence, better communication, more connection and less irritability. In quotes, it feels like I have my partner back. Inside the practice, clearer leadership, reduced defensiveness, better conflict tolerance, a noticeable shift in team and patient experience, and then long-term identity-wise, ambition remains but becomes healthier. Decisions move from proving to choosing, and orthodontics becomes enjoyable again, and meaning returns. And so, you listen to that, and it's sort of like a cool breeze. It's like, oh, I want that. That's what I want my life to feel like. And I can say for myself, I can attest to this, that it is not, even on this other side of I'm no longer burnt out, I'm still not this, this does not define everything. And why not?
Yeah.
I'm not perfectly disciplined.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's that saying, like a dog returning to its vomit.
Yeah.
And that's harsh. It's kind of gross too.
It is gross, but dogs do it.
We do the same thing of, for instance, I started working more from home, and maybe on those days I'll get started a little bit later, spend time with the family. I'll drink my coffee and sit in the sun and just kind of have a slower pace.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll sit in the sauna and cold plunge. And so again, in the book, it breaks down my philosophy and also getting tactical about things I do in terms of health and biohacking. But some people are going to read that or listen to this and say, well, I don't have that luxury. I feel like my business is kind of crashing down and I've got to get there at 7:30 and plan and be ready to go. And there are those seasons. You probably did this for many years. I know I did. The goal is to not be in that season long, right? So Bill Gates talks about the 10 years of hell of starting Microsoft. And I do think that is the founder's journey to some degree. Does it have to be 10 years? Hopefully not. That's a long time. But if you're training the team, if you're making the right hires, the right decision, hopefully you can get to a point where you can, reduce the 10 years of hell maybe down to 2 or 3. And again, I don't think it has to be hell either, because it's all about the perspective of how you're looking at it. Are you looking at it through the frame of, I don't have enough, or I know this is part of the process, and if I show up and work the system, I'm going to get to a better place in 2 to 3 years. But starting a business is tough. And so we're not saying, hey, read this book and, it can get there overnight. It is going to be a season.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is just maybe helpful perspective on two people who have gone through that effective, 10 years of hell, as it were. And on this side of it, again, I wish I could tell my younger self, you're doing some great things, know? And 10 years is going to be tough, but there are definitely some knobs you can turn and some things you can do a little bit differently to make this process less miserable.
Yes.
And why do we go through all this stuff? Why do we do a podcast like this? It's because I haven't perfectly figured it out. Like, I want other people to benefit from this, but I also want myself to benefit from it and to be reminded, like, yeah, there's some things I can definitely do to be better aligned.
I know. I was reading the book today, and I'm like, yeah, I need to read the book again.
Yeah. No,
and I wrote it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. So I guess the invitation to those listening, if you're still listening to this, wow, you're amazing.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you. And maybe, to be serious, it's because you're struggling with these things and you want to figure it out. You want to feel more joyful. The sort of practical invitation is to choose one small place this week where alignment can replace autopilot, you know? And I think one place where you can be proactive about your vision for your life and be less reactive.
And I'm going to do two things.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to eat better food. I've kind of strayed from that, if you can believe it.
I can't.
Coke Zero, it's really got a hold of me.
That's your vice?
And I'm going to get back to my morning formula because as of September, I haven't really had one. So those are the two things coming off this conversation that I'm going to do.
Okay. So now I have to come up with things that I'm going to do.
I'm not saying you have to.
Oh, man. I think at my best, I need to wake up earlier. I need to pray in the morning.
That's a big one.
I need to look at my goals sheet. I've gotten away from that. I wrote the sheet up. I have like my priorities for the year, and I changed bathrooms. We had like a bathroom renovation, and normally I have it on my mirror, and I've taken it off of the mirror. And it sounds stupid. This is like getting into the minutia, but just doing that, a simple decision. For 7-8 years prior, it was always on my mirror, and I look at it every day. I haven't put it up there, so I haven't been looking at it. And so, what are we into December? By the time this is coming out, who knows when it is? I'm going to fix that for this year, and I'm going to fix that moving forward.
I like it.
Yeah, because it is a very important thing to be faced with the most important things at the beginning of each day. So that's what I will try to do. And the rest, my friends, you'll have to read about in this book, which is available wherever books are sold. So I want to thank Luke. This is just chapter 1. How many chapters are in this thing? 13?
13.
Oh, my goodness. This is packed. There's going to be so much more to come. A lot of it will get really practical. If you feel like this is too high level, don't worry.
The book breaks it down and makes it so simple.
It does.
Yeah.
It's probably just better just to read the book. Just skip the podcast. Just read the book.
Wherever you're listening, we'll probably put a link. I mean,
you
can get it. I think we're going to sell it through our website, but Amazon, I was reading it on Apple Books earlier. You can get it paper or e-reader. So thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We will see you on the next episode. So long.